عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا وبعد. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. Begin as with all beginnings, that they should be invoking Allah Rabbil Alamin. So begin calling upon Him, remembering Him Subhanahu, declaring that He is the greatest, that He is the best, that He is one, He has no partners, asking Him for forgiveness, seeking His mercy, His blessings, His protection, His guidance, asking Him to bestow blessings and goodness upon His final prophet and messenger for all of humanity's guidance, and boldness the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we remind ourselves of what Allah Azza wa Jal tells us in that ayah that we read. O you who have believed, be mindful of Allah and cherish Allah as He deserves to be cherished, and do not die except in submission to Him. As Muslims, and that's what it means to be a Muslim. It means that you have accepted Allah Azza wa Jal as your creator, and that you are doing what you can within your ability to live in the way that Allah Rabbul Alameen, who loves us, who has created us and has given us guidance, so that this experience of life can be lived in a most meaningful way. Because this journey, this experience of life is meant to be a blessing. Everybody with me? We're born, we have our families, and the experience is meant to be a beautiful experience, is meant to be a blessing, especially as Muslims. And everything of what we're experiencing of goodness is supposed to further reinforce for us what we are learning from the Quran of Allah Ta'ala's final revelation for humanity, as well as from the blessed Sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, of what Allah Azza wa Jal tells us about paradise, so that we are further motivated to remain devout to Allah Rabbul Alamin, to be grateful to Him Subhanahu, to make sure that in our belief of Him Jalla wa Ala we remain sincere. In our worship of Him Subhanahu wa Ta'ala we remain devout. That within the limits that He has given us, that we take them to heart, because we trust Him to know that He has not given us those limits to make life difficult for us, to deprive us of happiness, but rather to keep us safe. That it is out of love and genuine care for us that He has given us these limits, the do's and the don'ts, because He knows what we do not. And so life as a whole, the experience was meant to be for us a beautiful experience. And our parents and family and teachers and everyone else is supposed to help facilitate that for us. But life is not perfect, is it? And because life is not perfect, what that means is the experience is not going to be perfect. And all too often what happens, unfortunately, is that when the experience itself has those hiccups, has those bad moments, if we do not understand how to put those into proper perspective, we can end up blaming Allah Rabbul Alamin. So Ahbab, this session that I'll be focusing on, it deals with our beliefs. And really our beliefs are the most important aspect with regards to our religious teachings. All too often we get very caught up on the mechanics of the rules. We want to know the halal and the haram, and more than anything, we want to know what's haram. But more important than all of that is to make sure that our beliefs are correct, and to understand that everything is built on this foundation of our beliefs, and at the core, our beliefs in Allah Rabbul Alameen need to be healthy. Our beliefs about Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala need to be beautiful. To understand that everything about Allah Rabbul Alameen is good. And that this journey of life, this gift of life, from the default, it was meant to be a beautiful experience for us. But it was never meant to be paradise. So unfortunately, people are not perfect. And because people aren't perfect, what happens is sometimes these problems become compounded. Our parents are not perfect, we're not perfect, our siblings are not perfect, our relatives are not perfect, our classmates are not perfect. And it can lead us to sometimes think like, man, life is just... And we can get to the point where we even question, like, why? You know, like, why even live? Like, why would God even create us? Like, is life a joke? What's the purpose? You know, why does he even have to be so cruel? And no, there's no cruelty in creating life. Life is a gift that's precious. Just because sometimes things may go bad and may go wrong, it doesn't mean that life as a whole has always been bad and is always wrong. What we want to try to do is make sure that in the way that we're looking at life, we don't allow shaitan to cause us to focus on what appears to be bad. We want to be able to acknowledge what is good and to express what is good. For example, raise your hands if, mashallah, you have somebody at home, whether it's your wife or your mother, who cooks for you. Raise your hands. And that's everybody, mashallah. Okay. Raise your hands if every time that they cook for you, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, that you, mashallah, express to them how delicious the food is and how much you appreciate them. Okay. Now let's flip it. Raise your hands if when something is a little off, maybe it's a little cold, maybe it's a little too hot, maybe it's a little too salty, maybe it's a little too spicy, maybe it's not spicy enough, maybe it's a little too oily, maybe it's something is a little off, that you express your opinion to them. Most of us, most of us are from this category. That we're going to go ahead and tell them that it was X, Y, Z. But when it comes to the first category, wallahi, they may be on point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times. And we may not even say anything. They may be the one who perhaps are prodding us, saying, well, wanting something of responsibility. Oh yeah, well, can't you tell? It's, you know, I'm not talking, I'm not saying anything. It's really delicious. But when something is off, we want to make sure that they know that, oh yeah, it's way too salty, or it's cold already, or something. We need to refine these things within ourselves. It's not a lost cause. There's nothing wrong with Allah Rabbul Alameen. He did not make us like that. The environment that we are brought up in, unfortunately, kind of is a bit conducive to some of these things. But it does not mean that we have to remain that way. So our beliefs about Allah Rabbul Alameen, we want to always make sure that we keep them beautiful. And here's the thing. Sometimes some really bad, in our eyes, difficult things happen. And that's when it becomes especially hard for us where we may say, like, why? For example, yesterday we buried a very beautiful dear brother. How many of you know Nabi Hamza? It seems like many of you, mashallah. Nabi rahmatullahi alayhi, his family as a whole, beautiful family. His brothers, all of them, mashallah. When a young man like that dies in a car accident, young, beautiful, handsome, righteous, beautiful character, it's hard. And sometimes it's normal and natural for somebody to ask that question and say, why? Why? Why somebody who's good and righteous and has so much, when you know that there's these horrible people who are out there, horrible people, that you would wish that their lives would be taken so that the people that they're hurting, that they would be safe and protected. Why is it that the good people are taken and those horrible people are left? We have these questions. Here's the thing. None of us have that knowledge. Allah alone does. And alhamdulillah that none of us are ever put, and inshallah we never will be put in a position of having to make such a serious decision that is going to ever have to impact the lives of people. But be certain that when Allah Rabbul Alameen makes decisions, He does so with infinite knowledge and wisdom. And this is where, once again, when we have our beliefs about Allah Rabbul Alameen as beautiful and good, we want to put things in context and say that yes, it is certainly difficult, no matter what, to acknowledge that it is difficult to lose someone that is young, that is so dear and precious. It is not easy. But if it was only left to this life in this world, then we would say absolutely that's it, game over. But has Allah Rabbul Alameen left everything to this life? We know that that's not the case, right? How does Allah Jalla wa Ala, how does He compare for us the life of this world with regards to paradise? Who could tell us? Are they at least equal? Yeah.
It's like a drop in the ocean, right?
Like a drop in the ocean. Which one's the drop in the ocean?
The dunya.
The dunya is like a drop in the ocean compared to paradise. You know, in this life, it's about who has money, right? You know, in paradise, it's not about who has money. And in this life, about who has money, it's really about whether you're born into it, whether you're lucky, and who knows what. Paradise has got nothing to do with whether you were born into it and whether you were lucky. How is it going to be determined? How will it be determined? Is everybody going to have the same thing in paradise? By the way, everybody is able to interact, inshallah. There's no bad answer, no wrong answer. Feel free to communicate, inshallah. Even the girls in the back, inshallah.
Maybe now it depends on how many good parts you
So in this dunya, There's currency, right? In America, our currency is what? So it's dollars and it's cryptocurrency right now too, right? The currency in paradise is hasanat. It's hasanat. So your hasanat is going to be the currency in paradise. And for that, subhanAllah, you have to be like 18 years old to start earning it. What are the conditions to start earning that currency from paradise? Anybody know? There really is no condition. You don't have to be baligh. You don't have to be of puberty. You don't have to be male. You don't have to be female. You don't have to be Arab. You don't have to be non-Arabic. You don't have. None of those issues are really there. If anything of an issue, it's that issue of junoon and aql, in the sense of whether a person is with their mental faculties sane or not. But otherwise, even children, what they do of goodness, it counts for. So, life, our beliefs, we really want to make sure that we're paying not just special attention to this, but extra special attention. And if we can understand that this is where it's most important, then where do you think Shaitan is going to pay more attention to try to hurt us? Would you agree it's going to be with this? He knows where it's going to affect you the most, and that's where he's going to pay attention the most. But know something, that Allah Azza wa Jalla wants you to succeed, and He wants you to win. And He's on your side. And Allah Rabbul Alameen, He's all powerful. Shaitan is not all powerful. The only thing Shaitan's got is that he's stealth. He whispers, he puts those thoughts into your mind. And he's only going to win if you continue to allow those thoughts to become something that you pay attention to. Otherwise, he's got nothing. Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam taught us, إِذَا مَاتَ ابْنُ آدَمَ فَقَدْ قَامَتْ قِيَامَتُهُ. That whenever any one of Adam's children dies, then their eternity, their judgment basically has begun and their eternity has begun. What we're going to be focusing on, inshallah ta'ala, within the series are al-ashraq al-kubra. Anybody know what we're specifically talking about with regards to al-ashraq al-kubra?
The major signs.
The major signs. The major signs. So if we say the major signs, then that would also mean that there's minor signs, is that correct? So here's the thing. The Arabic word, shart, linguistically, is talking about what in meaning means, al-alamu wal-alamatu, meaning that which is a symbol, a sign, an indicator. Okay. As-sa'a. What does as-sa'a mean?
Time.
Time. Right. And some of us, we use it today to mean like what? It also means like a watch, right? But if we're looking at it in the sense of time, ashratu as-sa'a, what is that referring to specifically? Huh? The Day of Judgment?
The signs.
The signs of the Day of Judgment? What do you think? Is that correct? Yes?
Signs of the hour.
The signs of the hour. Which hour?
Day of Judgment. Now.
Oh, the Day of Judgment. Correct. Here's the thing. It's all about the Day of Judgment. But do we know when the Day of Judgment is? Let's ask the question, go back to a very famous hadith, which is known as Hadith Jibreel alayhi salam. Remember the hadith that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates, the hadith that is collected in Imam al-Nawawi's holy hadith that most of you probably have read and maybe even memorized, where he tells us that there once came a Bedouin, a traveler, with the whitest of clothes and the blackest of hair. But yet there were no traces of a traveler upon him, and none of us recognized him. And he came and sat in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, knee to knee, placing his hands on the hands of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he asked him a series of questions. Who can tell me by raising your hand what was the first question that he asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Yes?
What is Islam?
He asked him, what is Islam? And what was the response? Yes.
Give him the 5 pillars of Islam.
Correct. He then told them what the 5 pillars of Islam. Everybody say them out loud. What are they? The Shahada, the five Salah, Zakat, fasting Ramadan, and then Hajj. Excellent. And then the questioner said to him, you have spoken correctly. And Umar radiallahu anhu said, we were amazed that this person is asking the question, and after he is answered, he responds saying, you have answered correctly. So wait a minute, you don't respond like that unless you know the answer. And it's like you're affirming the answer. But then he follows up with the second question. Who knows what the second question is? Girls in the back, let's have you participate, inshallah. Come on, who can give us, inshallah, ta'ala, what that second question was? We want to see some different hands, inshallah. Everybody's got to know this hadith, famous hadith, Hadith Jibreel. So much so that if it's ever said Hadith Jibreel, this is the only hadith that should ever come to your mind. So we know he asked about Islam. Very logical, very rational. What's the second one?
Who is Allah? Who is Allah?
Who is Allah? I can't hear you. The Day of Judgment. Not yet.
What is Iman?
He asks, what is Iman? What is Iman? And what is the response? Anybody know? Does everybody know? Right? The 6 pillars of Iman. Right? Belief in Allah Azza wa Jalla, so say them. Belief in Allah Azza wa Jalla,
Angels,
the angels,
the book,
books, messengers,
Qadr,
Day of Judgment, and then Qadr, the good and bad, right? And again, the response was, you've spoken correctly. And then there's a third question. Who can tell us what that third question was?
Ihsan.
Ihsan. Who knows what the answer to Ihsan is? Who can tell us what the response was? I'll give you a hint. I'll say it in the Arabic. أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. Does she help you out?
To worship Allah as if you've seen Him, and to know that Allah has seen you even.
Okay? That you worship Allah Rabbul Alameen as though you see Him. Although you do not see Him, for sure He sees you. Right? So imagine it, that when you're worshiping Allah Rabbul Alameen, that you're in His presence, that Allah Azza wa Jal, you're in His presence and He is watching you. To be at that level, that's what ihsan is. And then He asks a fourth question. And that's when He asked the question of what the young girl in the back said. He said, Mata as-sa'a? When is the hour? When is Judgment Day? And the Messenger ﷺ said, مَا الْمَسْئُولُ عَنْهَا بِأَعْلَمَ مِنَ السَّائِلِ. So the questioner has no more knowledge of this than the question, pardon me, has no more knowledge of this than the questioner. Meaning, I know no more about this than you. He says then, فَأَخْبِرْنِي عَنْ أَشْرَاطِهَا. Then tell me about its signs. Tell me about its signs. And then he began to mention something about its signs. So the first thing he mentioned was أَن تَرَى أن تلد الأمة ربتها. أن تلد الأمة ربتها. And there's different interpretations to what the statement means, but in the basic translation is when you see a slave girl give birth to her master. Okay. When you see a slave girl give birth to her master. That was the first. And among the interpretations that were given is that slavery was something that was going to increase to the point where people were going to have slaves, and those slaves are going to be giving birth to their masters, and so on and so forth. But another interpretation, and perhaps this interpretation, and it doesn't mean that one is right and one is wrong, because that one was also something that certainly there was a point in our history that we saw this. But another interpretation is that parenting becomes something where the way that children treat their mother, it's as though the children are masters and their mother is the servant. As though the children are masters and the mother is the servant. That's something that we also see happening, especially more commonly in our time today. Well, you'll hear mothers complain about their children, saying their children are ungrateful, they don't listen, they're so frustrated. Kids are making life difficult for their mother, especially when fathers are listening from the picture where the mother is all day with the kids and it's as though it's only her responsibility. Simple things that the kids won't even do. Won't put their shoes in the same spot, even though the mother said, please don't just kick your shoe here and there and put your plate, whatever, and clean up after yourself. Won't listen, won't do anything, as though the mother is the slave and the servant that has to. The other thing that he mentioned, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and tara al-hufat, when you see the barefoot, al-urat, the naked, ru'at al-shahi, the shepherds, the goat herders, the sheep herders, يتطاولون في بنيان, competing with each other and building skyscrapers. You see people who were poor, who had nothing, who their living was basically herding their livestock, who became rich and wealthy to the point where they're now competing with each other into who's got a taller building, taller house, a taller apartment building, a taller skyscraper. So that Bedouin got up and he left. And when he left, the Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim gathered around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said to them, do you know who that person was? They said, no, O Messenger, who was it? He said, that was Jibreel, who came to teach you your religion. So all that public question and answer and that whole public class session, that was to teach the people about those very critical fundamentals. So here's the question. Those signs, those two signs that were mentioned about giving birth to their masters and then the poor competing with each other in their buildings. Those are signs, right? If we said that the first one has given those two interpretations, I didn't say anything about the second one. What would you think about that second? Is it something that has happened in the past? It's not happened yet? Is it from the major signs? Is it the minor sign? How do we understand it, being that it was from the very question of tell me about the day of judgment? Okay, here are its signs.
Is it like talking about like the Arabs? Because it just came to my mind like thinking about like shepherds and stuff. And, like,
So talking about the Arabs. Okay. So here's the thing. First and foremost, when we think about anything of what the Prophet ﷺ is talking about, it should come to our mind that the context is he's talking about his own people. Right? First and foremost, it would come to our mind to say that he's talking about his own people, and more specifically, the Arabs of the Arabian Peninsula. First and foremost. So yes. What else? By the way, just so you know, some of you, alhamdulillah, I taught with some of you last year. So you kind of are a little bit more familiar with it. And I know that we're still kind of struggling with the janazah from yesterday. But I hope moving forward that inshallah ta'ala we interact. And that this is educational, but at the same time, inshallah ta'ala, it's enjoyable. Learning about Allah Azza wa Jalla, learning about our religion is not something that should be like, trying to eat dry bread without drinking some water or something. Right? Something that inshallah we can enjoy. Something that inshallah ta'ala nourishes us, it nurtures us. Something that inshallah ta'ala we can enjoy and we will enjoy. So come prepared, come ready to interact, to be engaged, inshallah. Yes.
But there's like barefoot Bedouins and places other than like the Arab Peninsula, like Singapore at that time, or like places all around the world. So,
Okay, so there's more than just Arabs that were barefoot and Bedouins. So if you look then to say that circle, Arabs that are outside of the Arabian Peninsula, you go out to the Middle East and you go out towards so on and so forth. what you'll come to find is that what was true of the Arabs was something that would then also hold true of humanity at large. And if we look at the times that we've reached today, we can certainly say that within the past century, we have certainly seen this aspect of buildings that have reached new limits and heights of construction that are unprecedented. So when we look at what have been mentioned in this hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, do you think that both of these are things that have been manifested, that have come true, or in some way, shape, or form partially have been manifested and come true? If yes, raise your hands. Okay. If no, raise your hands. If you're unsure, raise your hands. If you don't want to raise your hand at all, raise your hands. So, looking at this hadith, what we have to say at minimum is that both of these have been fulfilled. Both of these. Right? Living here, for example, just simply downtown Dallas, if you go take a look, you'll find that, mashallah, some of our buildings down there are 50 floors high. Those were pretty tall buildings. But then if you take a look across the United States, I mean, mashallah, you have some of these buildings that are 100 floors high and whatnot. Then if you go ahead and you take a look, mashallah, with regards to the competition, who has the tallest building in the world each year, it kind of, they compete with each other. It was Taiwan, then it was Korea, then it was, the Emirates, and who, they keep holding off now because who builds a taller antenna, and they're going to wait because now they want to make sure that they can make theirs a little bit taller than the other person. It's literally this competition. These are signs. It does not mean, though, that we're going to be able to pinpoint to say, yes, 2012, December, 24th, this is the date, this is the time. We don't have that ability to predict. What it does mean is that these are indicators to say that, hey, it looks like the time is near, but we cannot say for certain where, when, to be 100%. Like, here's the question to go back at something. What is the difference between a major sign and a minor sign? Especially if we look at these and say that these are minor signs, because we'll come to see that the major signs were something that were expressly mentioned by the Prophet.
Yes, the minor signs take place before the major signs, so it's like a build-up.
Speak up a little.
The minor signs take place before the major signs, so it's like a build-up.
So so the minor signs take place before the major signs. Okay. What else?
The major signs are more of like a major step towards the hour.
The major signs are a major step towards the hour. Okay. Yes.
The major signs are the biggest events that are happening during the day.
The major signs are the biggest events that are happening during Judgment Day. Okay. Yes.
The minor signs are more continuous and gradual process, while major signs are one single big event of something.
That the minor signs are continual, while the major are basically a one-time thingy. Okay.
The major signs mean like the hours arrive, and then the minor signs like it hasn't happened yet.
The minor hasn't happened yet. The major, that the hour is basically there. Yes.
The minor signs are more for warning.
The minor signs are more for warning. The major, alas, the warning is over. It's here. It's happening. Yes.
There's more minor signs.
There are more minor signs, and the major signs are basically 10. Yes. So all of these are basically, for the most part, correct and true. And among the other things that are mentioned is that with regards to the major signs, and Allah knows best, that with the major signs, that faith is not going to be accepted once that happens. But there's still difference of opinion, and Allah knows best. Here's the thing. I don't want to be frightening anybody with this because that's not the intent of this. Okay, so it's not about trying to scare anybody. So the question then is, what's the benefit in knowing about this? Why are we even talking about this? Is it like talking about jinn because it's like one of those campfire thingies that gets woo? Why are we talking about it?
To remind ourselves.
To remind ourselves, okay?
To increase our iman and taqwa.
To increase our iman and taqwa.
Feel more pressure to actually do something to prepare ourselves.
To feel more pressure to do something to prepare ourselves. Okay. What else? Who else? Let's ask you like this. How many of you, with regards to major things in life, like to actually prepare for it as opposed to just meshi halik, as they say in the Arabic, just go along and just don't even prepare? Does anybody like to just not even prepare, to just figure things out as you kind of get there? Is there anybody that likes to do things that way? Or are there people who actually like to prepare and try to, I would like to think that most people, in the way that our DNA is, in the way that Allah Ta'ala created us, is that for major things, we actually try to prepare. It's just a part of who we are and how we are. And so this aspect of why even know about them, it's part of Allah who Azza wa Jalla helping us to be prepared. It's out of Allah who His mercy for us, actually. Because out of His mercy is that, subhanAllah, imagine like your car. Anybody here drive? Raise your hands if you drive. Imagine if all of a sudden, your whole dashboard, somebody took paint and just covered it in paint. So now you cannot see anything of your dashboard. You can't see your speed, you can't see your indicator lights, you can't see nothing. Just drive. How would you feel?
Not safe.
I'd say you're all right. Somebody may say, well, the car still drives. Yeah, it still drives. But subhanAllah, when you think about how cars used to be to how they are now, where you now have these indicators, these alamat, these signs that will show up. Well, it's a mercy in the sense that you have them now to kind of help keep you safe. Allahu Rabbul Alameen, with what He is giving us of the minor signs as well as the major signs. He has given them to us to keep us safe, to keep us balanced. Because in the way that life can be, it is very easy for us to become overwhelmed by our life circumstances. Some of you are still so young that you probably don't know. But some of your parents, it's probably normal for them to work 12-hour days. And in countries not like America, it's normal for people to work 7 days a week. There's no labor laws like here. There's no child labor laws like here. There's no OSHA to make sure that there's safety and things of all of that sort of stuff. And so it is very normal for a person to become so overwhelmed and engrossed by just trying to support family and to live. And when that's the case, subhanAllah, your environment, it consumes you. You know, they say you have your head in the clouds. Yeah, it's very easy for somebody to have their head in whatever it is that they're just so engrossed in. Well, Allah Rabbul Alameen with these signs, just like our salawat and our ibadat, He grounds us once again spiritually to help us, to bring us back. Because sometimes, even though you may be in the most remotest part of the world, and you may have nothing of reference to these types of things, but subhanAllah, you then go ahead and you find out that there's these forest fires that are happening in Canada. They may not be affecting you, for example, in who knows wherever else you are. But you look and see, for example, New York City, in that whole northeast region, the northeast coast, people are wearing K95 masks all over again. The same mask they were wearing with Corona, the sky is orange. SubhanAllah, as I read that ayah, Surah Al-Dukhan, and be like, SubhanAllah, maybe this is a sign. Wallahu a'lam. The benefit in knowing is that all of these indicators are there to keep us grounded and to help us to remain balanced. To remain balanced. Well, when we look at the actual major signs, there are many ahadith. And here's one that we will focus on that mentions them. It is in Sahih Muslim. And the Rawi is Hudayfah ibn Usayd radiyallahu anhu. He says, اطلع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم علينا ونحن نتذاكر. I'll break it up. He says, one day while we were having a discussion, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam overheard us. And in some narrations it said that he was in a location a little higher up from them, they were beneath him. And so he looked down upon to them and asked, what is it that you are discussing? فَقَالُوا نَذْكُرُ السَّاعَةِ. It says we are talking about the hour, Judgment Day. فقال صلى الله عليه وسلم إنها لن تقوم حتى ترون قبلها 10 آيات. So he responded صلى الله عليه وسلم saying, know that it will not happen until you first see 10 signs. So this statement and the likes of it are what differentiate the major signs from what was mentioned in Hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam in others as minor signs. Minor signs. So the major signs, what are they? We're told فَذَكَرَ. Now, just so you know, the order of what has been mentioned, the order is not consistent in the different narrations. There's differences in what has been mentioned first, what has been mentioned last, what has been mentioned in between. But in this particular narration, we're told, فَذَكَرَ الدُّخَانِ. That smoke, الدُّخَانِ is what was mentioned. الدَّجَّالِ, the Antichrist, or the false prophet, that imposter. الدَّابَّةِ, that beast. By the way, we're going to cover each one of these individually throughout the remainder of this session, inshaAllah. The fourth, طلوع الشمس من مغربها the sun rising from the west, and then نزول عيسى بن مريم عليه الصلاة والسلام. Jesus, Isa عليه الصلاة والسلام, coming down, returning, his second coming. 6, Ya'juj and Ma'juj, the people of Gog and Magog coming. And then he mentioned ثلاث خسوف or خسوفات. The last 3 things that are mentioned, or 3 things that are mentioned consecutively, is that there's going to be 3 what you would look at as being basically almost like not landslides as much as they're going to be almost like sinkholes, really. And he mentioned خسف بالمشرق وخسف بالمغرب وخسف بجزيرة العرب, that there's going to be one of these major sinkholes of the earth swallowing up in the east, one in the west, and one in the Arabian Peninsula. And the last thing that he mentions is وآخر ذلك نار تخرج من اليمن تطرد الناس إلى المحشر أو إلى محشرهم. A fire in Yemen. And again, details will be added to all of these as each one of them will be given its own night, and it will basically collect the people, gather the people to the collecting place for judgment. SubhanAllah. So these are the 10 major signs, bi'idhnillahi azza wa jalla, that we will be focusing on. Just so that we conclude on a good note. Any questions on this before we conclude, inshallah? Any questions at all? Anybody paying attention? No. So those of you who said you were paying attention, I'm going to have you repeat back to me, inshallah, what the...
I have a question.
Okay.
What was the third thing that Jibril asked about in the hadith of Jibril?
The third thing, ihsan.
Ihsan?
Yes. So, were there any questions as far as what we had? Okay. Yeah.
Some people say that the Mongols were Yartuj and Martuj.
Yeah, it's a good point you make. So what we'll come to learn when we talk about them is that the Prophet ﷺ gave descriptions of Ya'juj and Ma'juj. And what we'll come to see is that the description, it matched very well the description of the Mongols. And that's why many people, especially those who lived and experienced the devastation that the Mongols unleashed, they believed it was them. Yeah. So that is true.
But is it true?
Excuse me?
But is it true?
But is it true?
Because isn't it like a long time ago? So
that would be part of the answer, right? If it was true, there was at least 800 years from that time till now. So here's the thing. Part of what we understand about these 10 major signs from what the Prophet ﷺ taught us is that, once the first one from them happens, is that the rest of them are going to take place back to back, kind of like, he used the term beads coming loose from a string. So you guys know the tasbih? So imagine, for example, if you took that tasbih and you had one side where you cut the string but you're holding it. And if you let it loose, and all those beads just fell off. Or maybe something that may be a little more culturally familiar with you, dominoes. You've seen where they've lined up those dominoes and they made a pattern out of them, and the moment you hit that one domino, that domino effect where it just knocks everything else down, that's the description that he gave. So what that's telling us is that the time that when one of the major signs, the first one that begins, that the rest of them are basically going to be back to back, if we can use that term. Back to back. And Allah knows best, yes.
Question. I mean, when we talk about the time in general, it's kind of relative to the time of the entire humanity as well, right? So I'm just thinking like all these things could take like between them hundreds of years, but because the time of humanity is so large that this seems less.
Not the major signs though.
Okay.
So when he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, وَعِدْتُ أَنَّ وَالسَّاعَةَ كَهَاتَيْنِ, my coming and the coming of judgment, they are like this.
Right.
That, yeah, you can look at it like that and say that, it's relative because millions of years or thousands of years or however it is, and he's putting his fingers together, yeah, it will be like it's a second. But what we're told with regards to, and we'll come to see this when we talk about the Dajjal, the Prophet ﷺ, what he's telling us is that he's going to be 40 days total.
Right.
The first day is going to be like a year, the second day is going to be like a month, the third day is going to be like a week, and the rest of the days are going to be like regular days. And so when we look at the rest of those signs, we're looking at everything really in a sense being a matter of just a few years. But all 10 of these major signs are going to be something that's going to be in a matter of a few years in Allah's best. A few years in the sense of how we understand years, our years, not in the sense of creation in that sense. Allah's best. Were there any other questions? Oh yes, I'm sorry.
I'm not sure if those are like humans or like monsters.
So we're going to talk more about each one of these when we get to them in detail, inshallah. So we're not going to, get into anything of the detail. We're going to speak about each of them, whether it's Ya'juj or Ma'juj or, the Dajjal or, Ad-Dabba, each of these, inshallah. We're going to give each of them their own quality time, inshallah. So here's the thing as we conclude. We have this beautiful hadith that is collected in Majma' al-Zawaid that Anas ibn Malik, radiallahu anhu, who was, anybody know anything special about Anas ibn Malik? Radiallahu anhu. Anybody?
You mean like his kunya or?
Not anything about the Sahabi that was special, peculiar.
He was Khadim of Rasulullah.
He was the Khadim of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he was a young man like yourselves, who for 10 years, the whole time that the Prophet ﷺ was in Medina, from the time he first set foot in Medina till the time that he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam returned back to Allah Rabbul Alameen, he was there serving him, and by interacting with him, he was able to learn not just the academic stuff, Quran and whatnot, but he was able to learn the application of it by interacting. He says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن قامت الساعة. So Allah's Messenger عليه الصلاة والسلام said, and he's narrating this, relaying this to us. If Judgment Day is happening, so pay attention to this. Imagine Judgment Day is happening, and we're present, and this is taking place. وَفِي يَدِ أَحَدِكُمْ. And if any one of us has in our hands what? Fasila. What is a fasila? A sapling. A tree that is a fruit-bearing tree. فَلْيَغْرِسْهَا. Plant it. Don't say, you know what? Judgment Day is coming. What the heck? It's over. Who cares? And you throw it. telling us something. Don't ever look at life and say, it's over, I'm done, it's done, who cares, and kind of give up and think that there's no benefit. Who's gonna notice? Who's gonna benefit? Who's gonna... With Allah Rabbul Alameen, even until the very last second, you do it. You do it. Ever there is of that goodness that you have that ability to complete it, do it. No matter how futile it may seem in your mind, do it. And leave the rest to Allah. And don't go looking outside in the world thinking, oh my God, how I can save all of the, sloths that are, out there in the world and who knows what of stuff. Because believe it or not, there's so much good you can do within your own homes. Part of that is just creating an atmosphere of kindness in the home. With your siblings, with your parents, reducing some of the stress that's within our lives, within our homes. Just that in and of itself is an act of worship, that the hasanat, the rewards and blessings are so tremendous. That perhaps that little bit of goodness that you do may count even more of a reward and blessings than if you stood up half the night and prayed. So don't go crazy thinking about, oh my God, what can I do, how I can do it. Look at the opportunities that you have in your own home. Because many of you are still young but within your own home, alhamdulillah, you may have many opportunities available to you. Just open up your mind's eye to see them, and your heart's eye to engage without being told, to see how you can contribute in meaningful ways. And I pray that Allah Rabbul Alameen guide us all that He loves and is pleased with, so that our family lives become all the more enriched, so that our relationship with Allah Azza wa Jalla becomes all the more beautiful, and so that our happiness is internal, and that Allah Jalla wa Ala truly blesses us to experience something of Jannah, of paradise, here in this world, in this life, before He ultimately blesses us with it when we return back to Him. Allahumma ameen. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد.